Now, during this embarrassing loss to Ole Miss, Georgia scored the lowest amount of points that they've scored in 8 seasons. The last time they got held to 10 points in the game or less was 2016. And a lot of Bulldogs fans are calling for Mike Bobo, Georgia's offensive coordinator, to get fired due to how conservative the play calling was against Ole Miss. He was calling a lot of bubble screens, a lot of short passes, a lot of checkdowns. He was scared to be aggressive and stretch the field vertically. And my question to you is, for those of y'all who want Mike Bobo fired, what the hell was he supposed to do with the offensive line instantly caving in as soon as Carson Beck hiked the football? You couldn't run the ball due to your offensive line not being good at opening up holes in the run game. You got all these drop passes by these receivers. Georgia's like top 3, top 5 in the FBS in drop passes with 28. You gonna blame Mike Bobo for the drops that these receivers have? Or you gonna blame Mike Bobo for the fumbles and the turnovers that Georgia had today against Ole Miss? We just have to accept the fact that Georgia offensively just sucks this year. You could put any offensive coordinator at the helm and the outcome still wouldn't be any different. If you can't win up front, you can't do anything. And if you are trying to stretch the field vertically, you gotta have time for those deep passing routes to develop. Carson Beck didn't have damn near any time at all to throw. And he didn't play that bad of a game. The team around him just completely let him down. Like, Ole Miss defense just suffocated Georgia offensively. And Mike Bobo, when he was the play caller last year, the offense wasn't bad. The offense was actually really good, just as good as what it was when Todd Monken was the OC before he left for Baltimore. But now when you don't have a Brock Bowers or a Lab McConkey, and you don't have any receivers that can create separation, you get these kinds of results. It doesn't matter who's calling the plays. If you don't have any playmakers, guys are dropping passes, guys are fumbling, your quarterback just has had tunnel vision all this season, there's really nothing you can do as a play caller, because you could put the best OC in college football on Georgia's staff right now and they still could be getting the same results, because you just can't do anything when you just don't have a good supporting cast. You got to have guys who can go out there and execute, and Georgia's receivers can't execute because they can't even do the most fundamental thing that comes to being a wide receiver, which is catching the football. I remember when I was playing high school ball, my head coach used to always say, if you can't catch, go play corner. A lot of these wide receivers that Georgia has out there are playing on the wrong side of the ball with all these drops. And this year, statistically, Georgia has ranked 102nd in turnovers. They are 128th in penalty yards. And then they're 97th in rushing yards per game, which is something that's uncharacteristic, because when you think of Kirby Smart teams, you always think of physicality. And that all hinges on their ability to run the football, but they can't do that because their offensive line has been banged up with injuries. Your best offensive lineman, Tate Ratledge, he's been out for some time. Your 87th and third down conversion percentage. Georgia just isn't good offensively. They just don't have the horses to put up 24 or even 30 points on the best defenses in college football. I was surprised that they beat Texas the way they did with how bad their offense has been, but their defense has been able to bail them out. Firing Mike Bobo isn't going to fix the root of the issue for Georgia, which is they just aren't good up front. And they don't have good receivers. And what has hurt Georgia up front is that you don't have a ton of depth on the offensive line. Why is that? Because of the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness. If you're a backup for Georgia, why are you going to remain a backup when you can go get a big bag and start for somebody else? So for Georgia, losing a lot of depth due to guys just snatching them up for NIL money and getting them in the portal, it's weakened Georgia this year. And I don't really think that this is going to be an issue that they're going to be able to overcome. And if they get into the playoffs, if they can beat Tennessee, I don't see them getting into the Final Four. I can see them getting into the quarterfinals, the second round, but if you got to go up against Oregon or Ohio State, you got absolutely no chance at all. Hell, if you were to play Texas again, Texas will slaughter you again. This just isn't a good Georgia team. This is the worst Georgia team that Kirby Smart has put on the field in the last 4 years. And I was wondering when we were going to see a down season from Georgia with how dominant they've been the past 3 years. In 2021, 2022, they had all-time loaded rosters. They had, from 2021 to 2022, two of the best defensive lines in the history of college football. It's hard to maintain that level of success consistently forever without having a couple of down seasons. The only difference between Nick Saban's down years at Bama and Kirby Smart's down years at Georgia is that even when Alabama was down, they weren't getting eradicated like how you did today against Ole Miss 28-10. Alabama would lose a game maybe by a last-second field goal. I can't recall too many times Alabama just got bullied and tossed around like how Ole Miss did you today. And firing Mike Bobo wouldn't change anything because your root of the issues is that you just can't do the fundamental things that it takes to have a lead offense, which is protecting your quarterback, opening up holes in the run game. You just don't have a good offense. You don't have a lot of talent at wide receiver. And when this season concludes, Kirby Smart needs to get with all of his donors. He needs to hit up his NIL collective and say, hey, man, like, we need $10 million, at least $15 million to buy the amount of talent that Ohio State and Oregon bought. This is what it's coming down to. It's free agency now, pretty much. It's the equivalent to NFL free agency in a sense when it comes to the transfer portal. If you have needs and you got to address them ASAP and you don't have time to wait on younger guys to develop, you got to buy up those great receivers if you got the money to do so. Kirby Smart has to do that. Why does Georgia not have a Ryan Williams or a Jeremiah Smith? You feel me? For Georgia to be the program that they are and to have the reputation that they have, you would think they would have some of the more dynamic playmakers on offense. Now, I get that you did get Trevor Etienne, and at the time when it first was announced he was transferring to Georgia, everybody was excited about how good he was going to be, but he's been banged up this year, and it's just been tough sledding for Mike Bobo and that offensive staff. But there's nothing that changing your offensive coordinator is going to do, because your offensive line and receivers just aren't good this year, and neither is Carson Beck. Imagine if you had a Cam Ward at quarterback this year. You feel me? Like, Georgia has to step it up. You got to spend that bread, Kirby. You got to drop that money. And listen, I know you don't like paying these guys, but you can't be stubborn forever, man. Look at what's happening with Dabo Swinney. Eventually, you got to change your philosophy. But firing Mike Bobo is not going to help Georgia out. You just got out-coached, outplayed, and out-talented by Ole Miss. There was nothing you really could do, man, at all. Carson Beck, as soon as he drops back the pass, dudes are blasting him in the face. What can your offensive coordinator do about that? The only thing you can do is call screen plays and short passes. You mean to tell me you finna be dialing up 40-yard bombs when your quarterback only has 0.9 of a second to throw? I'm glad some of y'all aren't calling the plays, because if y'all were, y'all would have got Carson Beck broken in half out there. Straight up.